that is not yours. Without further ado, this is TProphet. He travels the world and writes blogs about it on c31b.com. Let's give him a warm welcome. Thank you.
How are you doing, ToorCamp? So, who's lived abroad, like outside of their country of origin, country of residence? Cool. What's the most countries people have lived in outside of their main country? Just hold up some fingers, like 1, 2, 3, multiple hands. Anyone? So we've got, oh yeah, like of course Emerson Tan has lived in infinity countries. So this talk is about really just how to reboot your life and get some new perspective and live in different places. And I want to be really clear, it's not anything to do with, politics or anything like that. I just think travel makes the world closer together and it makes people better to experience other cultures. And so part of that is really getting up close and deep and being able to live in a different place. And so obviously, there's some bureaucracy involved in making that happen. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. So here's the agenda today. Introduction, I'll tell you a little bit about me, why I think people should live abroad, residency versus citizenship, some of the common paths to residency abroad and the pitfalls you might run into, and we'll do a case study as well. And then some common paths to citizenship abroad. And residency and citizenship aren't the same thing. They do both usually allow you to live in a country, but I'll get into some more details later. So who am I? I'm TProphet. I travel a lot. I've been to 95 countries and territories so far, according to the Traveler's Century Club list. We got some drone tacos. I am absolutely jealous. I've lived in 4 countries on 3 continents, and honestly, I'm nobody special. Like, any of you can do this. In fact, there's one guy here who's done more than this. So, absolutely, this is achievable and possible, and anyone can do it. So why should you live abroad? It's going to be personal reasons. You may want to gain some international career experience. That can be super valuable in your career. You might want to learn a new language through immersion. No better way to do it than to have to use it every day. You might want to get closer to your religion and live someplace where that's practiced more. You might want to be closer to a long-distance partner. That happens sometimes. Life comes at you fast. So you might want to diversify some of your investments. And depending on what you invest in, if you invest in things like real estate and so forth, it can be really good to be local because those opportunities are more likely to come to you if you're in the market. You might want to prepare for global thermonuclear war. Apparently, some of us are doing that and building bunkers in New Zealand. And then finally, you might want to avoid some legal issues. Maybe you have, some reason to not be in the country you're in, and you want to be somewhere that you can't be extradited. That's a possibility. So whatever your reasons, you don't need citizenship to actually live in a country. You can get residency there. And so let's talk about some of the differences really briefly. Residency, it usually comes in one of 2 forms, either temporary or permanent. Now, if you get temporary residence, there may be a path to permanent residency, but there isn't always. So you should be really careful in looking at the programs that you're getting into and making sure that that aligns with what your long-term goals are. Also, people's goals can change over time. You can get in thinking that something's going to be temporary, and then 5 years later, you're living there and getting married and a kid's on the way. And so, again, life can come at you fast, right? So it can be temporary or permanent. It allows you to live in a country, but you don't get any citizenship rights when you are a resident of a country. And that means that it's easier to get kicked out, too. You have fewer legal rights, generally speaking. So if you want to go to a protest, well, maybe you can do that, but you might find yourself on the next plane home. It doesn't necessarily get you out of citizenship obligations, which is kind of unusual. But if you come to the United States as a resident, you actually have to register for selective service in the U.S. military. That's something that I recently learned. That's unusual. That's required for residents, not just citizens. it's easier to get residency usually than citizenship. And we'll kind of go into some of the paths to be able to do that. It's quicker usually, and there's less paperwork involved. And then some of these paths with residency can lead to citizenship, but a couple of problems, right? Citizenship, it's usually hard to get. It takes time, or it takes money, or most often both. It comes with all of the rights and obligations of being a citizen. And so that's awesome until you're being drafted into the military, for example, in a country where you got a passport. And then you can't always hold multiple citizenships. So some countries are really jealous. You either have our passport or no other passport at all. So let's talk about a couple of the paths that I've used to live abroad. And there are lots of different ways to do this. So these are just a couple of the more readily available paths to somebody who's working in the technology industry. And these are ones that I've used myself. So I used to work for Microsoft. I was there for 13 years. And one of the adventures that I went on, of the many adventures that Microsoft sent me on, was to go live and work in China. And I lived in Beijing for 3 years and ran IT for Microsoft Research Asia. And so part of doing that meant that Microsoft did all the paperwork, they spent all the money, and they sponsored my visa to live and work in China. And so this is a very reasonable option to many people who are here, because you too work in the tech industry or do technology things, and that's an in-demand thing in a lot of places. Also, many companies operating in the Pacific Northwest have a global presence, and so some of the countries where you might have opportunities include Canada. Microsoft has a huge office in Vancouver, for example, and another big one in Toronto. China. China is a really, really important place in the technology industry. There is a massive amount of innovation there. They lead the world in AI innovation. It's a country that graduates more computer science PhDs than any other country in the world. And keep in mind, there's 1.4 billion people in China, so it's a really big place with a huge population, and anything that comes along with that is going to come with a lot of opportunities in industries they concentrate in. And technology is certainly one of those. So Intel, Microsoft, Amazon, even Google have a presence in China. Taiwan. Anybody heard of a company called TSMC lately? Okay, yeah. So obviously semiconductors are a really big thing in Taiwan, but they do much more than that too. There's a ton of software as well. And so lots of opportunities in technology in Taiwan. India. If you work in IT, the Indian government around 20 years ago decided that they wanted to take over the world in IT, and they aligned their entire educational system around training people in the IT field. India, like China, has a lot of people. They have a population of 1 billion, and so they're able to turn out more IT talent than any other country in the world. And certainly if you are in that space, IT, cloud computing, SaaS, anything to do with that, India is a really important place. Ireland, this seems a little odd, but Ireland got a foothold in the technology industry with a tax dodge that Microsoft was doing through its subsidiary Round Island One Limited. And there was this, complicated tax maneuver called the double Irish and a Dutch sandwich. You can't do that anymore. I won't get into that. That's like MBA stuff. But starting from that, it turned out that Irish talent on the technology side is pretty good too. And so American companies started planting roots in Ireland, and now there's quite a few of them operating very quietly in an English-speaking geography in the EU. Finally, the Netherlands, same thing. Netherlands got their feet wet in the technology industry through tax dodges. They have a very generous interpretation of royalty payments, and so because there were a lot of tech people there, and also people in the entertainment industry, because the entertainment industry benefits from the same tax stuff. That led to some offices opening, and now technology opportunities on the tech side as well in the Netherlands. So these are ways, these are countries that if you're thinking, hey, I would like to work abroad and look toward where there may be better opportunities for me, If you work in software or security or hardware or just anything technology, these countries are some of the ones that you might want to look at with paths to residency through employers you might already be working for. Education. I did an MBA in the Netherlands, so that's where I learned about this tax dodge stuff and compensation strategy and all this business stuff that was a big gap in my knowledge. There's many other educational paths, both short-term and long-term. Should you do an MBA? Absolutely not. Never do one. It's probably the worst thing that I've ever done with time and money in my life. I learned a lot, but I could have learned way more just starting a startup. So don't do an MBA. But if you want to learn something you don't already know, then consider doing that in another country, and then you can get that international experience too. It's always okay to take off mid-career and get some additional education. So this is a really goofy thing that I learned about living in the Netherlands. It's called the Dutch-American Friendship Treaty. So did anybody who's an American know that we are such good friends with the Netherlands that you can just move there? Anyone knew this before? Okay, well, I'm going to tell you about it now. There's one guy here.
I know because you told me.
Oh, yeah, so Paul knows it because I told him. Okay, so here's the path. If you're a U.S. citizen, and this only works for U.S. citizens, there's just this goofy treaty that was formed after World War II between the U.S. and the Netherlands. And it was basically, the idea was that the Netherlands really wanted Americans to come in and open up businesses and employ the poor, war-shattered, war-torn Dutch people from their country that had been bombed to rubble. And this is still there. Like, it never went away, because that's what happens with treaties. They get signed, and then people forget about them, and they just kind of take on a life of their own. So if you go invest 4,500 euro to start any sort of new business in the Netherlands, doesn't matter what it is. You could open a sandwich shop. They don't care. Don't open a sandwich shop. Like, it's kind of a Dutch joke. They really like sandwiches in the Netherlands. I don't know why, but you could open literally any kind of business. You put, yeah, like for breakfast and lunch and dinner. Sandwiches are very much a thing in the Netherlands. If you're wondering why you've never seen a Dutch restaurant, visit the Netherlands. Anyway, 4,500 euro into any new business in the Netherlands, and you just maintain this investment. So what that is you go open a bank account, put 4,500 euros into it, never touch that money. You need to be able to show that you've maintained that investment and that the investment is just, you put it in a bank account. You get a 2-year residency card, and then after that, you can renew for 5 years, and then you can renew it again every 5 years. If you have a partner, your partner gets a regular Dutch residence visa that's a working visa, and this is one that they don't need to be self-employed for. Somebody's raising their hand in the back. Like, you got a question or a comment?
Oh, sorry, I just want to ask quickly. It might be like getting ahead of this, but when you get the presidency, does like when you go in Europe kind of like sit down in?
No. So that's a really good question. I'll repeat it for the people that are listening on the stream. If I get a Dutch residence card, do I actually have to live in the windy, cold, flat Netherlands below sea level? Or could I go live somewhere with better weather like Spain? And the answer is no. You have to live in the Netherlands. You've got to be there for at least 183 days a year. You genuinely have to be a resident of the Netherlands, pay taxes there, all of that, because you aren't a citizen yet. Now, if you get citizenship, you can get permanent residence after 5 years, and that's possible if you learn Dutch. So good luck with that. It's a very difficult language. It seems like it wouldn't be, but it's a really difficult language. Some people are saying it's not actually all that hard. I don't know. Like having struggled with Dutch and Chinese, I think that Dutch is harder, but that may be just me. Anyway, if you can learn Dutch, then you get permanent residence. That has a path to citizenship, which would then let you live anywhere in the European Union. But if you're a PR, if you're a resident in the Netherlands, you're expected to live in the Netherlands. So this is an interesting wrinkle. Your business can include freelancing or remote work contracts paid in the Netherlands. So if you're already freelancing here, you could just set up a company in the Netherlands. The tax situation's actually not that bad there. And then have yourself paid through your own Dutch company, and you're completely golden. So this is good for self-employment only. But if you do find say you start doing work for a Dutch company and they like you and want to hire you, they can sponsor you for a regular employment visa, and you can change your visa type without having to leave and come back. So I'm going to start with the stuff that's less shady and kind of move to the residence types that are more shady during this presentation. So did you know that you can get residency in Mexico and you don't actually have to live there? You can. It's what we call a paper residency. So this residency is based on economic solvency, is what they call it. And so it's one of the easiest residencies for U.S. citizens to obtain once you're retired. Now, there's no legal definition of retirement, and you don't actually have to be drawing a pension or anything. Maybe you just decided that you quit your third job and that makes you retired. I don't know. It's just however you and the consulate defines retired, that's retired. But in any event, the requirements can vary by consulate because, again, in Latin America, a lot of things are a negotiation. If you spend any time there, it's what the rules are on paper and what actually happens are not necessarily always the same. And so some consulate shopping can be helpful to find a consulate that's amenable to the situation that you want to set up. And so these are the current requirements at McAllen, Texas. Now, I mentioned McAllen, Texas for no particular reason. There are lots of consulates, Mexican consulates, but there just happens to be one in McAllen, Texas. Anyway, the temporary residency, so there's a path to permanent from temporary residency, means that you need to have 12 months of proof, excluding your gold and crypto. So I'm sorry, you crypto heads, you've got to have actual real money, and your shady bucks don't count either. $57,623. They want to see monthly statements with at least that much for 12 months. And then the other way you can do it is if you have 6 months of pay stubs or 6 months of proof of income that's not pay from a job, but is from rental property or something like that, then that's $3,458. So that's for temporary residency. Yeah. 401ks do count for assets for this, yes. And in case anybody's wondering, how most people could qualify based on economic solvency, maybe you've been working in the tech industry for a while and you've got a 401k and it's just been sitting there. If you have a 401k with Fidelity and you talk to the branch office manager of the Bellevue branch, and you tell them that you're planning to buy property in Mexico and you need to prove to the Mexican government that you do not intend to become an illegal immigrant in Mexico, they will very happily produce a letter with your account balances per month and a wet signature on it from a VP at Fidelity, which is what's required by the consulate. So temporary residency, it works for this, and so does permanent. So permanent residency, you want a permanent residency that's got a path to citizenship. So this is interesting if you want a green passport, because Mexican passports are green. Did you know you can go to the European Union with a Mexican passport? They'll let you right in, no problem. It's no issue. So if you happen to be from a country where travel's a little bit harder, I don't know, Kazakhstan, for example, and it's harder to get it's hard to get a passport that has better travel. This could be a really good path, potentially. So $230,489, 12 months of proof, just like I said with the temporary residency, gets you permanent residency. It's basically the equivalent of a Mexican green card. They're peach colored, not green. They used to be green. Anyway, the income requirement, again, 6 months proof, $5,763. And so again, this is a negotiation. You can't just meet the requirements. The consul is going to interview you. So you're going to sit down with the consul in McAllen, Texas, for example, and they will decide whether they think you're retired enough and whether to issue the visa. So now, we'll kind of, spiral down to the shadiest of shady options, like a second chance residency. So, you might be thinking, this all sounds great, TProphet, but I'm a felon. What do I do, as far as options? And how can I pass a background check? Well, so here's 3 options for residency in countries that don't do any background checks. One is Colombia. So if you want to live in, lovely Medellin, then you can get temporary residence for 5 years. They do a background check for permanent residence if you're not converting from temporary. But if you want to just go in as a temporary residence, they don't do any background checks, and then you can do 5 years of being a temporary resident, convert to permanent, and then there's no background checks for that. To do it, you need to be a pensioner, so you need proof of regular income, or you can be an investor, so you actually need to put $150,000 into Colombia. This can be hard for some felons, but also they don't really seem to verify stuff all that carefully. So and if somebody's a felon anyway, they might not really care about forgery. I'm not saying you should do that, but people looking for second chances might possibly do this. Chile, so they do temporary residency only, and that's for 2 years. But the thing with Chile is you have to actually live there. They actually want people moving there because it's just a really long country, and they need more population, I guess. So in any event, you can get in there with no background checks. Finally, Mexico. So if you meet the requirements for temporary residency, they issue this without any background checks or police certificates or any of that required. So there are, oddly enough, 2 options in Peru and Italy. But these are bureaucracy needles to thread. There's very specific ways to get into Italy without background checks, and there's very specific ways to get into Peru without background checks if this applies to you and you're looking for a second chance. So let's talk about some other common paths to residency. It's important to note that every country sets their own rules, and there are a lot of countries in the world, so 193 of them. So these are residency types in this chart that are just offered by a lot of countries and the most common options. But whatever it is that you want to do, there's probably somewhere in the world that you can make it work. And some of these have a path to permanent residency or citizenship, and others are dead ends. So this is important. You need to know where it ends up. Investor or entrepreneur, usually you can do temporary or permanent. Skills-based migration, many people here have skills that are very much in demand around the world. And so a skills-based migration or a government interest visa may be available to you, depending on how in demand your skills are. Family-based, so you can get permanent residency fairly often through getting married, for example. Religious-based tends to be temporary, so that's just for religious study only, and then they expect you to go home. Retirement visas, they can be temporary, they can be permanent, just depends on the country. Refugee visas, the entire idea with refugee visas are that they're intended to be temporary until whatever's going on in your home country is over, and then you can go home. That's the idea anyway. So there's very rarely a path to permanent residence through those. Government interest, so the government of the country just decides that they want you to live there. And they're going to make you an offer that you can't refuse. That could be temporary or it could be permanent. So, and then digital nomad. So a lot of folks, hey, anybody worked as a digital nomad before? Yeah, we've got a couple in here. Those visas, they're great for what they are. They let you go hang out in the Bahamas for a year and work, for example, just work from the beach. Bahamas is a great example of a country that does this. And there is literally no way to turn that into staying there permanently at all. They want your money for a year, and they want you gone. So this gets into pitfalls, right? So a couple of the pitfalls are you could choose the wrong program. So maybe you decide that you want to live someplace forever after you live there for a while, but the paperwork that you filled out doesn't actually give you a path to any sort of permanent residence. That's a problem, and you will then need to leave and reapply usually. Legislative changes. So you don't actually have any rights. So the government can change the rules at any time, meaning that the time required in the country, they could start to impose some. So if you get permanent residency in Mexico, for example, with the idea that you're going to have it and just not live there, well, that may continue to work. I don't know. But the government could change their mind and say, if we're going to give you a residence card, you have to live here. You can't just use the residence card to set up banking for your offshore crypto or whatever. Tax obligations. So you could end up with tax obligations in countries that you get residency in. So that is absolutely something to consider. And here's an example. Like Dubai said, come move to Dubai. 0% tax. And who believes that any country can continue to have 0% tax forever? Anybody? Yeah. So it's 9% now in Dubai. They basically changed the rules suddenly. Just kidding. And by the way, it's like an emirate. Like it's ruled by an emir. Like the emir said, you pay tax now. Like you're not going you don't have any choice. Like that's kind of how stuff works there. Naturalization processes. So whether or not you could naturalize and become a citizen. Well, maybe it was an option when you started, but they changed the rules and you can't now. Missed paperwork. Maintaining residency in a foreign country, it's usually complicated. It could require periodic filing of documents, tax forms, etc. And tax consequences. Note, living in Paraguay probably won't get you out of your U.S. taxes, even if a bunch of sovereign citizen types on the internet say that it totally does. And also, the weather's terrible there. It's hot all the time. So don't move to Paraguay thinking that you're not going to have to pay any tax. That's just not a thing. So, Rakat, why not come up here? Let's talk about a case study. So, where are you from, Rakat?
I'm from Kazakhstan.
Okay, so Rakat's from Kazakhstan, and I'm from here, and we're a couple. So obviously that is a problem if we want to live together because somebody's going to have to move to another country. And we figured out the most efficient way to like hang out and continue traveling together because that's what we like to do. We've kind of spent a few years going to World Heritage sites was for us to basically have common residency. So how that worked was I filed an I-129F petition, and with that, you have to submit a ton of proof of relationship. And so I noticed that at bureaucracy this year, there's no requirements to prove relationships. So this is just an idea for next time that you may want to like actually when forms are filed, don't just trust what's on there. Like require photographic evidence with GPS coordinates because that is literally what is required for this. So that's a 6 to 18 month process, and basically it's started by the U.S. citizen partner. And then after that, the Department of Homeland Security will issue authority to the State Department to issue a K-1 visa if a K-1 visa is applied for. Like this sounds like a bureaucracy process. It's actually real life. And so as part of that process, there's a DS-160 form that Rakat filed. I had to file a promissory I-134 form, which is my promise to the U.S. government to reimburse them for his deportation costs if he runs away to work illegally. And then there were many other documents that I'm going to let Rakat talk about because he had to deal with all of this in Kazakhstan.
Yeah, so basically like any other application, you need your photographs and then ID, and also just like Robert talked about before, you can't move here being a criminal, so I had to do a police certificate and get my documents apostilled so they're recognized in another country. And I also had to get my birth certificate and just to, it's not required. Other things like diploma, I just bring with myself, and yeah, basic documents like those, my passport, ID, photographs, police certificates, yeah, things like that.
Army certificate.
Yes, exactly. Army certificate, or if you haven't been in the army, like army book or copy, what do you call it? Army book, I think.
Records.
Yeah, records that you registered. So yeah, basically, and then you get interviewed. At the embassy.
Too.
Oh yeah, medical examination. So yeah, they check if you're healthy enough to move to the United States, and then
And aren't going to spread dirty Kazakh diseases to the U.S.
oh yeah, and also if you are mentally healthy, even though in America there are no mental hospitals. And yeah, at the consulate or embassy, I got interviewed and got asked questions like, how did you guys meet? Where have you been together? When have you last been together? Where have you been together? And if your family or if his family know me or him, that kind of questions I got asked. So yeah, basically that's it.
Yeah, so that's basically where we are in the process right now. So it's also, we've got another fun piece of bureaucracy that happened. The embassy was supposed to give him an envelope with documentation in it when his visa was delivered, but they didn't deliver it because they changed contractors, and the new contractor forgot to pick those up from the embassy. So when he got here, it was like 4 hours of customs trying to figure out what to do with him, and they finally let him in for 30 days, but he's not stamped in officially. So this whole box that says marriage, if we got married at ToorCamp before he's officially stamped into the United States, then it's a really simple bureaucracy process. We just have to refile our entire thing under a different form, wait another 18 months, and then he could get a different visa in the consulate in Kazakhstan. So we're not going to get married this weekend. Anyway, after that happens, there's an adjustment of status, an I-485, which gets followed. Potentially another medical exam, depending on when all of this is done and when we get it filed. And then I have to again promise to the U.S. government on a different form that Rakat will not claim any welfare or food stamp benefits. And if he does, I'll pay for that. So anyway, that's kind of an example of what the path to living in the United States is for people who are coming here. And so it doesn't stop there. That gets you a 2-year conditional residency. And then that's a 6 to 12 month process to get that 2-year card, after which it's renewable and it becomes a permanent residence card. So next on, Jana was raising her hand. What's up?
I was just curious, after all that poking and prodding and learning how we have no good mental hospitals here, you still want to go college?
Oh, yeah. Do you think it's still a good idea to move to the U.S.?
I'm risking it.
Yeah. So he is fully briefed on the risks, and part of one of the risks is you might have noticed we're both guys, and the Supreme Court is going to outlaw gay marriage probably, or overturn Oberfell. So that will then turn into who knows what immigration status is going to be under whatever future administration we have. Fortunately, Mexico protects gay marriage in their constitution, so that's one option. And then the Dutch-American Friendship Treaty would allow me to move there, and he could get a residence card based on that. So we have a couple of backup options. What's up, Emerson?
Does is it Racket? Yes. Yeah. Do you qualify for an O visa?
Absolutely not. He's an English teacher. And it turns out there's not a lot of demand for native Kazakh-speaking English teachers in the U.S. So if anybody, yeah.
Yes, there is. Unfortunately, you have to live just outside of Washington, D.C.
Oh, yeah. There you go. That's true. Awesome. So yeah, I'm going to dive into citizenship next. So thank you, Rakat. I'll see you after the talk. All right, so after hearing, citizenship versus residency, you might think, hey, this residency stuff sounds really complicated and annoying, and there's all these things I have to continually prove and reprove, and I've got to, file documents and renew it, and the rules could change. Wouldn't it be better to just get citizenship? Well, there are some pros. You get a passport. That's shiny. You got your passport with you, Rakat? Oh, no, it sits in the cabin. Okay. He's got a bright blue passport, and it looks beautiful, and I'm totally jealous of it. But usually comes with right of residence, working in government jobs. You can even run for public office in most countries if you're a citizen. You get consular service and protection worldwide, and that can be pretty useful. It's usually harder to take it away and kick you out than residence if you if whatever you're doing falls out of political favor. Crypto people, for example, and potential tax advantages as well. That may be a thing. But here's some cons. If you take the citizenship of Austria, for example, you will have to give up your other citizenships in order to naturalize. You get to have one passport if you're Austrian, and that's the Austrian passport. It may be impossible to renounce. So if you read online that, hey, you can get citizenship in Argentina, and then it's got this like express path to being able to immigrate to Spain through your Argentina passport, et cetera, well, that's all well and good, but what could possibly go wrong? I mean, certainly not Argentina invading the United Kingdom or anything and getting kicked out, and Argentines getting kicked out of the European Union or anything that the UK can influence. Definitely couldn't possibly happen. So you are a citizen, so you may have all of the obligations of citizenship, tax obligations, military service, etc. And then the foreign consulate, where you have your second passport, may not be very helpful to you as an English-speaking American in Death to America-stan, or wherever you happen to be. So that Turkish passport might not be as useful for consular protections as you would think. So some common paths to citizenship or nationality. Now, most of us acquire citizenship by birth, and that's an immediate thing, that's birthright. But every country sets its own rules. Passport holders in a territory are usually nationals, with slight differences in rights. These are naturalization types offered by many countries here on this chart, and the most common options, but again, like with residency, countries all set their own rules, and they can give citizenship to whoever they want to. Not all countries allow dual citizenship, so keep this in mind when acquiring citizenship, and that can be really important if you're from China, for example, because you will lose your hukou in China. And that can mean you lose the right to own property, a lot of really important things to you in China, for example, if you take a foreign passport. And Argentina, they don't allow renouncing citizenship, and they have gone on military adventures in the past that could be incompatible with what you want to do with the citizenship, so do keep that in mind. Ancestry, 12 to 36 months, usually you can get citizenship through Ancestry. That's a birthright thing. The U.S. visa lottery is something that's pretty well known outside of the United States, but maybe most people here don't know about it. We've got a special visa type called DV1. The U.S. government wants to encourage people who are from countries where there aren't a lot of their nationals living in the United States to come here, and that's just to grow diversity of our country and economy. And create more connections around the world. So you can apply for a lottery if you're from one of those countries. For example, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, almost any place that isn't Mexico, India, or China, where we already have a lot of people from those countries with very large populations living here. The investment citizenship is a 6 to 18-month process, and I'll get into that in the next slide. You can get citizenship by marriage, and that's 4 years to 7 usually, and that's going to be a naturalization process. Ordinary naturalization, what do I mean by that? Well, that means you come on, say, a work visa, and then you change it to permanent, and then you just naturalize like the normal way. Many countries offer this kind of option, and it takes anywhere from 5 years to 20 years, just depending where you come from and what country you're targeting. Extraordinary ability, now, for most people, this is not for you. For people here, this could be for you. Countries can just decide to give you a passport because you are one of the top people in the world in your field, and you're doing something that country thinks is important. And so they can just give you a passport and say, hey, we'd like to give you a passport. Would you come live in our country, please, and just keep on doing what you're doing? And it could be anything from Olympic athletes on up to people that are super accomplished in information security, for example. And then finally, government interests. So if the government decides that it is in their interest to give you a passport for whatever reason, like to make you a spy, like any sort of government reason, they can do that 0 to 6 months, and it's typically naturalization. So who has heard about being able to buy a passport? Like, Yeah, a lot of people. Yeah, exactly. So if you're ever interested in this topic and you start looking around on the internet, then like all of a sudden like these citizenship by investment things pop up, and there's all sorts of people in this business. I am not launching a company to do this because like all of this stuff is really shady, and there's not a lot of money in it, honestly. It's the most widely promoted solution to a problem that most people, and especially pretty much anyone here, doesn't have. So you hear about these a lot online because they require a large investment. And so that means there's, commissions that brokers can skim, and so they buy a lot of keywords on Google. The most appropriate audience for a citizenship by investment kind of scenario is people who are pretty wealthy, but they have poor mobility passports. So, think of a business owner in Pakistan who is really successful with like a leather goods business or something, but just and wants to be able to travel for business reasons and just is constantly having to get visas, and it's a real pain in the neck. It could be really worthwhile for somebody like that to buy a passport with better mobility. Some people do expatriate for tax reasons. There are people like all the way back to cypherpunks. One of the first people to do this was Vince Conte into Anguilla. And you can do that. Like you can move to another country and renounce your U.S. citizenship after you get a passport from someplace else, and pay the U.S. exit tax if it's applicable, and then you're not a U.S. tax resident anymore, right? But it's not super easy to do. It won't necessarily save you much in tax because you have to pay tax wherever you moved. And you're giving up some pretty major benefits by doing so. Does anybody here think that the U.S. passport isn't going to be useful to have ever? Yeah, probably not. Yeah, so it can create tax headaches for you having a second citizenship because you have to file taxes in two countries now, and it can come with obligations either for you or for your children. If you take a Turkish passport, for example, you don't have to serve in the army, but your kids do if they get a Turkish passport. And they may not know that until the first time they show up in Turkey and get drafted right when they scan in. So popular citizenship by investment countries, if this is still something that appeals to you, or if you know somebody with, who's pretty wealthy and has a limited mobility passport that this could be useful for. Turkey, if you put $400,000 in property or $500,000 in a totally solid Turkish bank deposit in a country where there's absolutely like no inflation at all, then you could get a Turkish passport. They're not very good, actually, but you can do it. Malta. So Malta's in the European Union, and most people probably didn't know you can just outright buy an EU passport. You totally can. The Maltese will hook you up. Live there for 12 months on any residence permit, and then after that, you just make a 750,000 euro donation to the Maltese government, and they will, in exchange, they'll give you a passport. St. Kitts and Nevis. This is a Caribbean island. It's a couple of Caribbean islands, actually. If you give the government $250,000 in a donation, or you make an approved property investment, an approved development, which I'm sure nobody's brother-in-law is involved with, then you can get a St. Kitts and Nevis passport. Egypt, if you've ever thought, I really just want to travel on an Egyptian passport, I guess if you're from Yemen or like Syria or something, like an Egyptian passport's better. They may be a little bit less selective in who they give these to than Turkey, but it's not a good passport for travel at all. But $250,000 in donation to the Turkish government or $300,000 in real estate will get you that Egyptian passport. And then finally, Dominica, Grenada, Antigua, and Barbuda all have a $200,000 donation program. Now, note that these donations are plus a bunch of fees, and that's where these brokers come in. So you can expect to pay $50,000 to $75,000 on top of that. Yeah, Virus, what's up? Egyptian, like that just started. Yeah, it's like a couple of months old. Yeah. Are there any benefits to having a Caribbean passport? Well, it depends where you're from, right? If you are from Cuba, it would be way awesome because you can go to the European Union without to the Schengen area without needing a visa, right? If you're American, no, because like the U.S. passport can go pretty much everywhere Caribbean passports can, except for Russia. So some of these passports, like they've got like really good relations with Russia. So if you don't want to get Russian visas and you just want to be able to travel to Russia whenever you want to, then one of these passports could help. But a Turkish passport can also travel to Russia. So if you're really into Russia, like and you want one of those, then maybe a Turkish one you wouldn't just outright be paying $200,000 for it. Yeah.
Where's the money for the donation go? Like, kind of a...
Where does the money for the donation go in Dominica? Well, Dominica has a sugar retirement fund for people that worked in the sugar industry in Dominica before it got taken over by corn syrup. And so, like, basically their pension fund went bankrupt, and this is the way that they continue to pay people's pensions. Allegedly, I mean, that's what it is on paper. Maybe it is. Maybe it actually is. I mean, these programs tend to be pretty opaque. Like you wire some money to somewhere that is known for banking that is questionable, and then you get a passport that is rapidly diminishing in value because they're selling too many of these. So popular residence by descent countries, this is maybe a little more interesting to folks here because you might have some relatives in your family tree that you could claim citizenship based on. And so in the upper left-hand corner is Italy. I've now run into 3 people in the last 6 months who've managed to successfully claim Italian citizenship. And so if you have a great-grandparent or somebody more recent in your family tree than a great-grandparent, so great-grandparent, grandparent, parent, something like that, you may be able to claim Italian citizenship. Yeah. Some of them can have language requirements. I don't have time in the talk to dig into all of those, but yeah, there can be some, understanding history and culture and language and those kinds of things. Germany, so great-grandparent or later descent, potentially. And again, it just depends on your particular family tree and the programs available to you. Ireland, Emmanuel Goldstein publicly announced a few years ago that he became a citizen of Ireland. He's the editor of 2600, The Hacker Quarterly, and it's because he had an Irish grandmother, so he was able to claim that citizenship. So if you have a grandparent or later descent born in Ireland, or you have an Irish parent born anywhere in the world, then you can claim Irish citizenship. Now, why are these citizenships from Europe really useful? Some of you may be starting families, have families already, have kids, be looking at the cost of college, and it is much, much less expensive for European citizens in Europe versus here in the United States. So it is well worth doing this just to have the optionality on being able to send your kids to college in Europe, and it could be good for them too. Yeah, Jenna. Yeah, Denmark. Yeah, and again, this is just popular. So, Denmark's a pretty small country. That's why I didn't include it. But yeah, absolutely. There are 9 countries in Europe where they offer some form of citizenship by descent. Denmark's one of them. Latvia, I think, also is. Yeah.
The grandparent needs to have had their child at your parent before they renounce Italian citizenship. Otherwise, it's cut and you don't qualify.
Yeah, there are asterisks in terms and conditions, and so it's not just like a show up and you get your citizenship like that. When I said that 36-month up to process, like there's lawyers involved and lots of proving things, and many forms at Italian bureaucracy in Italian, by the way. So USA, if you've got one American parent, terms apply. Then that's residence by descent, or that is citizenship by descent. Canada, same thing. One Canadian parent, terms apply. And then Mexico, one Mexican parent, no terms apply. So some folks have a parent from Mexico, but were born here. Doesn't matter how long ago they came to the U.S., you can actually still get Mexican citizenship. So, thank you, TourCamp, and this is now a time for Q&A and Ask Me Anything. And it can be anything about this topic, or, some of you know I like to travel or book trips with points or any of that kind of thing. Happy to answer questions until they kick me off stage. By the way, if anybody wants to be amplified, there is a mic up here that you can use if you want, but just yell at me too if you like. Somebody was raising a hand. Yeah, what's up?
So for Netherlands, your MBA, is that tuition free?
So was my MBA in the Netherlands tuition free? No, I spent tens of thousands of dollars on it, and it was a terrible investment. Don't ever do that. Yeah, in the back.
Straightforward to read Italian citizenship by descent flowchart. All the ones I've seen are written by someone who doesn't know what a flowchart is.
Okay, so somebody asked, does the country that invented Bugattis, which are the most complicated car to drive in the world, have a straightforward and easy flowchart for citizenship by descent? And no, it's going to be the most complicated thing you've ever looked at because it's immigration and it's in the Italian language and it's Italy. They really like bureaucracy there. That's why you hire lawyers. So just hire a really good immigration lawyer and have them do all the things because if you try to DIY, it's just going to drive you insane. I rarely say don't DIY, by the way. I rarely say throw money at a problem and make it go away. Like for this kind of stuff, throw money at the problem and make it go away. Yeah, what's up?
How many people doing the digital nomad thing do you actually know or have encountered who actually do a digital nomad visa versus just doing tourist visas?
So who's doing digital nomad visas versus working illegally as a tourist in Thailand, for example? And the answer is, it really depends. So what's happened is a lot of people were working in Indonesia, in Bali in particular, illegally as digital nomads, and in Thailand illegally as digital nomads, and doing these like perpetual tourist visa run things. And countries have just gotten sick of it because they don't, they're not getting any tax out of it. It's like wrecking their housing market, etc. So they're trying to put more controls on it by now having some sort of digital nomad visa. Are people actually doing them? Well, yeah, because Japan launched one, and it's actually a pretty legit path to being able to work in Japan. So it just kind of depends on the country. Like, if it's a country that's more officious with documentation checks, and it's one that is more desirable to be in, people are willing to do more work to be able to live there. And so Japan would be a good example of that. Yeah, Japan. Well, and that's the thing. Like on my chart, I said, "Hey, is there a path to permanent residency of any sort?" Like, no, there's not. Like the deal with the digital nomad visa is it's basically an extended tourist visa with a right to work not in that country. So they're not going to make you pay tax there as long as you're working your job back at home. But really, what they want you to do is come in and spend money and leave, and that's what all of these digital nomads programs are set up for. They're fine for what they are because they're not actually asking you to pay tax there while you're there working as a digital nomad. And that's a good thing because like many of these countries have very high tax rates. Japan has crazy high taxes. U.S. taxes look cheap compared to that. So if they're not going to take tax from you while you're living there, that can be a pretty good deal. But the flip side of it is, yeah, you don't get to stay here a long time. This is short term. Yeah. Taiwan, yeah. Taiwan has some really good programs for residents. That was not on my list. Taiwan also has some really significant geopolitical challenges. Generally speaking, I think it's better if you want to live in Taiwan and you work in the tech industry to get a job here and be posted over there through your U.S. employer. And the reason for that is that you'll get paid a salary that's an international salary as opposed to a local Taiwanese one. Local salaries in Taiwan are not good at all. So if you're getting in on like the one that we'll mention, they're going to see you already as a local resident and pay you accordingly. So it's absolutely an available option. It's one of the best to just live in Asia. And it's hard to get into Asia as a permanent resident. Taiwan will let you do that, but the flip side of it is low salaries. In the back.
I just wanted to ask you quickly about the German one. Like, I literally just have to show them that my great-grandparents were German, and they'll just, like, mail me a passport. Like,
so the question was, so I just have to prove that I had a German great-grandparent, and they'll mail me a passport? Like, it's that simple? And it's like, no. It's Germany. There will be very detailed forms to fill out and a lot of things to prove, and you'll need to read words that, I don't know, like, does anybody know a complicated German word that's got lots of grunts and snorts in it? Because, yeah, exactly. So, not to overly make fun of Germans, but it's not easy, but it is possible. Oh yeah, that's another thing. Germany doesn't allow 2 passports. They're one of those countries that's jealous. You'd have to trade. Oh, a couple of weeks ago, Emerson says they changed it.
That's something on the passport. It's actually kind of funny because I have 2 passports and I have a Russian passport too, so I can travel everywhere. But Russia is jealous. You can't really have another passport. So what you do is you travel to Russia on one passport, you travel to the US on another passport. So legally you're only citizen of one country on one, but you actually have 2.
So the security guard who's just about to kick me off of the stage, I think that's who this is, says, I have a Russian passport and I have another passport as well. And so what I do is I just go into Russia on the Russian passport and I don't tell them about the other one. And like a lot of people with Chinese passports and other passports do the exact same thing with the Chinese government. It works until you get caught and then you are up a creek without a paddle. So better to play it straight usually. Oh yeah. Like in China, they totally will rip up the other passport in front of you. Like it's
I have 2 passports too, and the trick with what you're doing is that if you travel back to US, they say, why your US passport is not stamped? Like they question like what. So what I have to do is like I travel and sometimes put the American passport, sometimes the Czech passport to collect some stamps. So everywhere they be like.
So there's a comment in there that has a really good point that I think that we'll end on because we're really close to needing to end, I think. Or how many minutes do I have? 0? 2. Okay, I got 2 minutes, so I got time for one more question after this. But so you need to enter the country on the passport of that country. So if you have a U.S. passport, you need to enter the United States always on your U.S. passport. And so yeah, like it can be really awkward at customs sometimes. If you go to a country where you have another passport, they might say, hey, why don't you have a stamp like, when you're from the country that you're coming from in your US passport? And here it's pretty easy. Like we allow dual citizenship. So you just say I'm a dual citizen. I had enter with their passport. And it's easy peasy, no problem. Other countries may not have quite as charitable a view. Like, there are a lot of U.S., Canada, U.S., Mexico dual citizens in North America. It's a pretty common thing here. Other countries, it's not nearly so common. So it can really create awkward moments for you at immigration if you don't play your cards right. There was one other question I saw. Yeah. So the question is, what do lawyer fees look like for some of these passports? So the answer is it just really depends on the local geography and how complex your case is, just like any other kind of legal situation. It's generally going to be more expensive the more distant your relatives are because there's the more stuff that you're going to need to prove. And if you're looking at a very high-cost country, then your lawyers are probably going to be more expensive. What I will say is that one thing that can dramatically impact your legal costs is whether you're working directly with a lawyer or whether you're hiring one through a broker. So if you, look on the internet and there's like some, capitalist nomads or something like that, not naming any particular firms, this is just a generic statement, they might mark up those referral services by 10 to 20 times. So, and really not provide a lot of value beyond referrals. So if you're going to pursue this, it's best to find expert attorneys in that geography with really good track records and good recommendations. And then it's just going to cost whatever it is in that local market. But I wouldn't go through a broker. Generally speaking, you'll want to work directly through an attorney. There's an asterisk on that. I worked through a broker for residency in one country because I don't speak the language there. And so, but I also knew what the lawyer actually charged and how much the broker's markup was. And it was, in the couple of $100 range as opposed to the like $20,000 or $30,000 range, right? And that's for being able to navigate those language challenges. That was totally worth it. Okay, well, I think I'm out of time. So thanks again. Thank you, ToorCamp.